Hey guys, welcome back to Ed Puzzle. For the last week, before Christmas break, we're going to resume using these. Today we're going to finish up the chapter on Reconstruction by talking about the election of 1876 and the Compromise of 1877. So a real short Ed Puzzle today. 1876 is the election that follows the Grant administration. And 1876 is also the centennial of the United States, right? It's our 100th birthday. There's national festivities, and America's really ready for a change. We spent the last 11 years focused on Reconstruction. People are really sick of that in the North. People are sick of the Republican administration led by Grant, marred by corruption, as we'll see in our next chapter. People really just want to focus on the economy. And as we're going to see in our next chapter as well, industry is booming following the Civil War, and people are just focused, particularly in the Northeast, on making their money. And people just don't want to do Reconstruction anymore. It was a great thing while it lasted to a lot of Northerners, and they just don't care anymore. So what we get in this election are two really no-name candidates that you'll probably never hear of again, and that's totally okay. The Republicans nominate Ohio Governor Rutherford B. Hayes, and the Democrats nominate the Reform Governor Samuel Tilden from New York, who we'll talk about in our next chapter. Tilden was known for dismantling the Tweed Ring of New York infamy. So after the results are tallied, Tilden had clearly won the popular vote, almost 250,000 more votes in the popular vote. But as we know, the electoral vote is the only one that matters. He needed 185 electoral votes to win. After almost every state was counted, he had 184. There were 4 states left: Oregon, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. They, however, emerge as a real big problem, as we'll see. Both parties in the state send sets of electoral votes to Washington, D.C. to be counted. So you have the Republicans sending their votes and the Democrats sending their votes. The question is, well, which one do we take? Because this is really nothing that's ever happened before in American history, and we really don't have a precedent for it that would tell us what to do. So, because we don't know which set of electoral votes to take, Congress establishes a committee to resolve the crisis. There is no, contingency in the Constitution for this, so we kind of have to make it up on the fly. And as a result of this, the election of 1876 is considered one of the most corrupt national elections in American history, rivaled really only by 1888, which we'll talk about next chapter. So Congress appoints a committee of 15 people. Remember, Congress is run by the Republicans at the time, so conveniently, there is an 8-7 Republican majority on this committee. When they vote, of course, they decide to take the Republican electors, which means Hayes would have the victory in the Electoral College. That would put him over the necessary 185, despite being a minority president, meaning he lost the electoral vote, the popular vote, excuse me. So this is the recommendation of the committee. It must get approved by Congress. Democrats in Congress are not going to allow this because they see it as a corrupt joke, right? Of course, the Republicans are going to go with their guy and what's a rigged election. So only a few days before the inauguration, March 4th, 1877, we still don't have a president. Finally, the Republicans and the Democrats come to a compromise of sorts that really leaves us with a sour note on the end of Reconstruction. The Democrats agree to allow Rutherford B. Hayes, who you see in the bottom corner of the screen with the beard on the left, to be the president, even though he clearly hadn't won. And as a result, he'll be known as his fraudulency in American history, right? Play on his excellency, but as a fraudulent winner. But in exchange for taking the White House, Republicans have to give the Democrats a whole bunch of things, basically to make this deal worthwhile. And the Democrats come out winning this deal tremendously. They're going to require that Hayes remove all troops from the South. So as a result, that bayonet rule that had been enforced to protect African Americans is now gone. Second thing they have to do is put a Southerner in the cabinet. There had not been a Southerner in the cabinet in a very, very long time. This would give the South a seat at the table in discussions regarding any national issues and could have an impact on presidential thinking going forward. And the last thing the North would have to do is basically repay for all the damage of the Civil War. If you remember the destruction that General William Tecumseh Sherman had created, the North would have to pay for all that. They would have to pay for the reconstruction of railroads, subsidies for infrastructure, for factories, those kinds of things. Despite the fact that the South started the Civil War, the North is going to have to pay for all of the destruction. And what this basically allows is a complete domination of state politics by Southern Democrats. We know they're going to be the party of segregation as a result of Plessy versus Ferguson. They're going to be the party of Jim Crow, and there's really no one to stop them as a result of this compromise. So yes, the Republicans get the White House, but the Democrats take back the South and will establish the Union as it was, if you remember from that political cartoon. And this is the end of Reconstruction. We define this compromise as the end. Leaves us with a really bad taste in our mouth. The whole point was we were supposed to bring back the Union and help protect African Americans. While we've done the former, we have failed tremendously in the latter. And we're basically giving free rein for the South really until 1954 and even a little bit into the 1960s to implement legal segregation that we know as Jim Crow.